30 years later, I recognized her laugh before I recognized her face. I was sitting in a cafe near the train station, waiting for the train that would take me back to a city I never wanted to set foot in again. And then I heard that laugh, the same one as always, just lower now, more tired, but unmistakable. I turned around slowly, afraid it was just my mind playing tricks on me. And there she was, Inez, 30 years older, the same eyes, and when our eyes met, she stopped laughing in the middle of a sentence, as if time had frozen for both of us at the same moment. I did not know, in that moment, that this accidental meeting was about to undo 30 years of a life I had carefully built to forget her. My name is Marcus. I am 52 years old. I am a civil engineer, divorced for 4 years, with a daughter who lives in another city and calls me on Sundays more out of obligation than desire. My life after the divorce became small. A 2-bedroom apartment, one of them empty. A gym routine on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Dinner alone most nights, usually in front of the television, usually not paying attention to what was on. I would not say I was unhappy. I would say I was functional. There is a difference, and I had learned to live inside that difference without complaint. That morning, I was coming back from a funeral. The father of a college friend. We had not been close in years, but some things you do out of respect, even when the respect no longer carries any real weight. The funeral was in the city where I grew up, the city I left at 22 and never wanted to live in again. I had 2 hours until my train. I went into the cafe near the station because it was cold, and because I did not know what to do with 2 free hours in a city full of ghosts I had spent 3 decades avoiding. Inez Carvalho was the first person I ever truly loved, not the teenage way, where you love anything that smiles at you. The other way, the way you only understand later, once it is already too late. We met when we were 19 in college. She studied architecture, I studied engineering, and we shared a structural calculus class that neither of us really understood. We started studying together. We ended up dating without either of us noticing exactly when that had happened. Inez had this way of laughing that came from somewhere deep inside, without warning, usually at the wrong moments. She laughed during sad movies, during serious meetings, in situations that called for silence, not because she found the situation funny, but because something inside her simply could not hold it back. She drew on every available surface: napkins, the margins of books, my hand once, during an entire class, without me noticing until I got home and saw she had drawn a small house with a tree beside it on the palm of my right hand. We were together for 4 years, the best 4 years of my life, although I would not admit that until decades later, sitting in that cafe. At 23, I got a job offer in another city. It was an opportunity too good to turn down, the kind that does not come around twice. Inez had just started at a local architecture firm, a job she had wanted forever. We talked about it for weeks. We talked about long distance, about plans, about visits. But deep down, both of us were negotiating the end of something, and neither of us had the courage to say it out loud. I left. I promised to call every day. I called at first. Then I called less. Then she called less. Then a month went by without a single call, and when we finally talked, we both already knew, without needing to say it, that it had ended a long time ago. We were just making it official. There was no fight. There was no betrayal. There was only distance, and the distance did the work neither of us wanted to do. I never went back to that city, except for funerals and weddings I could not avoid. In 30 years, I had perfectly avoided any situation where I might run into Inez Carvalho, until that morning. She was sitting 3 tables ahead of me, with her back to me at first, talking to another woman, probably a friend. Her hair, which had been long and dark when I knew her, was now short and gray. cut in a way that looked intentional, not resigned. When she laughed that way, I felt my stomach drop a full floor. She turned around, maybe sensing someone was looking too long, and our eyes met. For 2 seconds, neither of us reacted. It was as if the brain needed extra time to process the information, compare the face in front of it with the file stored 30 years ago, and confirm the match. "Marcus," she said. It was not a question. It was a statement, in a tone I could not decide was shock, surprise, or both at once. "Inez," I answered, and my voice came out hoarser than I expected. Her friend looked from one of us to the other, realized she had just walked into a scene that wasn't hers, and said something about needing to go, which was probably not true, but it was kind of her to make it up. And suddenly, it was just the two of us. In a city we had both spent our lives avoiding, on a Tuesday morning neither of us had planned for. Before I continue, if you are enjoying this story so far, drop a comment and tell me where you are listening from. I love seeing how many different places these stories reach, and subscribe to the channel because there is a new story every week. Now back to it. "Can I sit?" I asked, pointing at the empty chair at her table. She looked at the chair as if she were calculating something, then nodded. The first few minutes were awkward, the way it can only be awkward between two people who once knew each other completely and now have to relearn how to talk to one another like polite strangers. I asked about her life. She told me, in short sentences at first, then longer ones, as the awkwardness faded. She had run her own architecture firm for 15 years. She had been married, widowed for 6 years. One son, already an adult, living abroad. I told her about myself, engineering, the divorce, the daughter who calls on Sundays. She listened the way she always had, with full attention, without that look of someone just waiting for their turn to speak. "Do you still draw?" I asked, for no apparent reason. But it was the first question that came to mind. She smiled, picked up a napkin, and in less than a minute sketched the coffee cup in front of me, with a precision that made me realize, yes, she still drew, and she was still extraordinary at it. "You never called me back," she said, still looking at the drawing. Not at me. It was not an accusation. It was a fact, stated without weight, after 30 years, but still a fact that had stayed there the whole time. "I know," I said. "I was a coward." She finally looked at me. "So was I," she said. "We both were." We talked for over 2 hours. My train left without me, and I did not even notice until I checked my phone and saw the time. She told me about her husband, a man she described with genuine warmth, with no implied comparison to me, which somehow made everything easier to hear. He had been good to her. They had been happy. He died of cancer, too fast for anyone to prepare. I told her about my marriage, which had been comfortable for a long time, and then had simply stopped being anything at all, until we both admitted it, and went our separate ways without drama, but also without anything that felt like real grief. At some point, she said, "I thought about you, you know. Not all the time, but at specific moments. When I finished college, when I opened the firm, when my son was born. I would think, did he know? Does he remember this was the day of my final exam?" "I thought about you too," I said, more than I wanted to admit back then. "Why did you never come back?" she asked. "Not to me. To the city. You have family here. You just disappeared." I thought about the answer for a long moment. "Because it was easier," I finally said. "If I did not come back, I did not have to find out you had moved on without me. As long as I did not know, somehow part of me stayed here, with you, the way it used to be." She was quiet for a while. "That is the saddest and the most beautiful thing anyone has ever told me," she said finally, "and also the most foolish." I laughed. She laughed too, that old way, without warning, from somewhere deep inside. By late afternoon, the cafe was almost empty. The waiter had already changed shifts twice. "I live nearby," she said. "I have a studio at home where I work. I have real coffee, not this stuff. Do you want to see it?" I checked the time. There was no train left that day that made any sense. I would have to stay in the city anyway. "I would love to," I said. Her house was a 15-minute walk away, on a tree-lined street I did not recognize, although I was sure I had walked it decades ago. The studio was a room full of light, with drafting tables, drawings hanging on the walls, plants in pots that looked cared for over many years. On one entire wall, framed, were old drawings. I recognized some of them right away. They were from college. And among them, one stopped me completely. It was me, 23 years old, sitting at a library table, hunched over a book, with that look of concentration she used to say I made without realizing it. "You kept this," I said, unable to hide what I was feeling. "I keep everything worth keeping," she said simply, "even when it hurts to look at." Before I continue, drop a like if you also believe some people never fully leave us, even after decades, and subscribe, because there is a new story every week. Back to it. We stayed in the studio until it got dark. She made real coffee, like she had promised, and then opened a bottle of wine she said she had been saving for too long, waiting for an occasion that never came. We talked about everything and nothing. About the 30 years each of us had lived separately, about the people we used to be and the people we had become, and how, in some strange way, we still recognized in each other something that hadn't changed. At some point, she said, "You know what is funny? I never stopped doing that thing, laughing at the wrong moments. I thought I would lose it as I got older. I did not." "I know," I said. "That is how I recognized you. Before I saw your face, I recognized your laugh." She was quiet for a moment, looking at the glass in her hand. "Do you want to know something I never told anyone?" she said. "I do," I said. "On my wedding day," she said, "right before the ceremony, I had a moment, alone, in the room, and I thought about you. Not because I had regrets. I loved the man I was about to marry, truly. But I thought, I wish he knew I was happy. I do not know why. I just wanted you to know. I did not know what to say. So I said nothing. I just reached my hand across the table, and she put her hand on top of mine. And we stayed like that for a while, for a length of time that did not need measuring. I stayed in the city for 3 more days, not because I had any practical reason to, simply because I did not want to leave yet, and for the first time in a long time, I was not interested in justifying my choices to anyone, not even to myself. We spent almost the entire 3 days together. We walked through the city, and she showed me the places that had changed and the ones that had not. We visited the university, which looked almost exactly the same, and we stood in front of the library, where it had all started, without saying much, because we did not need to. On the 3rd day, before I finally caught the train, sitting on the platform, she said, "I am not asking for anything from you, Marcus. I am not expecting this to become something. I just wanted to say these 3 days were the best I have had since my husband died, and I think that is already a lot." I looked at her, at this face I had known at 19, and was recognizing again at 52, and I thought about all the versions of myself that had existed along the way. The cowardly boy who had left without looking back, the man who built a functional life because he did not know how to build anything else, and this one, sitting here, feeling, for the first time in years, something that was not just functional. "I am not expecting anything either," I said, "but I also do not want this to be just this." She smiled, that way that came from somewhere deep inside, without warning. "Then let us let it be," she said. I caught the train that afternoon, but this time I took her number with me, and this time I called. I called the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that, and I kept calling, and at some point, without either of us setting an exact date, I started making the train trip every week, the way she had imagined I might have done 30 years ago, but neither of us had the courage to ask for back then. Today, 2 years after that morning in the cafe, I live in the same city I had spent 3 decades avoiding. Her studio now has an extra desk, where I work on the days I stay home, and on the wall, next to the old drawing of me at 23, there is a new one. Me, at 54, sitting at the same table, with the same look of concentration she says I never realize I make. When people ask how we found each other again, she tells the story of the cafe, the laugh, the 30 years. And she always ends with the same line. Some people we do not forget because they were important. We do not forget them because they never really left. If this story moved you in any way, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from. I read every single one. And subscribe, because there is a new story waiting for you every week. This is a work of fiction. All names, places, and situations in this story were created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people is purely coincidental.